I've made it no secret that I'm a massive PlayStation fanboy, even though I never had a PlayStation as a kid. I spent most of my pre-adolescent years playing the PlayStation 2. Now, I've already said all I wanted to say about the PlayStation 2. But now it's time to talk about another PlayStation gem. The PlayStation Portable is one of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite handheld video game console of all time. Yes, I love the Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo 3DS is pretty cool too, but I think I spent a lot more time with the PlayStation Portable than I ever did with any other console, handheld or otherwise. Seriously. Released in Japan on December 12, 2004, and the following year, in March 24th, the PlayStation Portable was another console that I purchased with my own money. I saved and I saved and I saved for weeks, maybe even months. I was so proud of myself when I got it. I took it everywhere with me. I was so attached to my PlayStation Portable that I took it to one of my first volunteer jobs, but then I lost it. I was so grief-stricken and bored without it. Not for long as I pre-ordered another from GameStop that contained a copy of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Then about a year later I got my old one back again. Unfortunately, as with the Game Boy Advance, I grew bored of my PlayStation Portable and hocked both of them and the games I had for it for peanuts. Also, unfortunately, unlike the Game Boy Advance, I have not bought another PlayStation Portable. However, I do have a PlayStation Vita on which I can play my top 5 favorite PlayStation Portable games.
Hey man, what are you doing? I'm playing nut. Why don't you come outside?
Larry, what the f*** is this?
Well, it's an advertising campaign we tried to come up with to appeal to the youthful spirit of America.
Hey, you can play nut outside? What?
PSP. It's a nut you can play outside.
What the f*** was that? That was the stupidest. I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you. Oh God, why do you have a knife? Because, Larry, just for such an occasion, where you make the stupidest commercial in the world, and I'm like, you
As I have mentioned in my top 5 PlayStation 2 games video, I am a big Jak and Daxter fan. But I had a pretty tough time deciding which portable Jak and Daxter game to include on this list, as there were two. One was a game called Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, and the other was Daxter. Ultimately, I decided on Daxter because of the nostalgic attachment for one thing, and for another, Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier was released on the PlayStation 2. Daxter was one of the first games I bought for my PSP. I guess it kind of comes full circle, because one of the first games I bought for my PlayStation 2 was Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. Daxter, a spin-off of the second game in the franchise, plays similarly to the previous games. You run, you jump, you punch, you shoot, but there are also mini-games you can play. For example, the first minigame you have the option of playing is a quick time event kind of minigame, where you have to press the right button at the right time to progress. These minigames are kind of stupid and annoying to me because they have nothing to do with the rest of the story, but they are absolutely necessary to progress through the game. Speaking of story, this game starts more or less after the beginning of Jak 2, the second game in the Jak and Daxter series. If you know the story of Jak 2, then you'll know the story of Daxter. If not, well... At the beginning of Jak 2, Jak is transported into the future where he is promptly captured by soldiers and tortured for 2 years. Daxter takes place during those 2 years from the perspective of Daxter, Jak's sidekick. During that time, Daxter gets hired by an insect exterminator and spends the rest of the game pretty much swatting flies. May sound boring when it's described like that, but trust me, if you played and enjoyed any of the Jak and Daxter games as I have, you will know that Daxter is anything but boring. Daxter is one of the most fun games in the Jak and Daxter series, and one of the most fun games I've ever played, period.
You're gonna make us all go bankrupt! You motherfucker! I don't want to.
Mega Man Maverick Hunter X.
Mega Man is one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Sure, the overarching storyline of all the games can be a little confusing, and Capcom's handling of the franchise is very irksome when thought about for too long, but still, Mega Man will always have a special place in my heart. And Mega Man X will always be one of the best games in the franchise. At the time I had a PlayStation Portable, there were no video game stores in my area that were selling old-school video game consoles like the Super Nintendo, and eBay was not an option for me either. So I had to settle for what was available to me. And boy howdy am I glad with what I got. Sure, the game is tough as nails, which may not be to my liking, but still, I always keep playing it because it's so much fun. You know those kind of games. They're hard, they're frustrating, and they make you want to throw your controller at the TV. But still, it's the most fun you've ever had being angry. Such is the case with Mega Man Maverick Hunter X. The storyline is simple enough. Mega Man X is created to stop Sigma and his army of Reploids from destroying the world, and along the way he is helped by his pal Zero, and some homoerotic subtext is implied.
He's so gay.
And in true Mega Man style, after every boss you defeat, you take on their powers.
Now I've got your power.
That clip never fails to crack me up. But in a nutshell, if you can't afford a Super Nintendo or a copy of Mega Man X, then go ahead and dust off your old PlayStation Portable and get yourself a copy of Mega Man Maverick Hunter X. It's available on the PlayStation Network for like $10. It's a steal.
Buy a PSP anymore! Ah! I'm so stealing!
The PlayStation Portable was discontinued in June of 2014. And yet, against all odds, almost 1 year later, a brand spankin' new PlayStation Portable game was released unto the world, and it was christened Brandish, the Dark Revenant. And as it turned out, yeah, it was pretty cool. A reimagining of an old JRPG on the Super Nintendo, Brandish, the Dark Revenant, is a dungeon crawler that I literally couldn't put down for hours. Seriously, this game sucked me right into its tractor beam of gaming fun and didn't let go until I cried uncle. And even after I turned the game off, I still kept thinking about how much fun it was. I guess it goes hand in hand with my recently acquired taste for dungeon crawlers, which I will get back to momentarily. In the meantime, let's talk about Brandish, the Dark Revenant. In this game, you play a valiant knight who wakes up in a hellish labyrinth full of monsters and mazes and every little thing that wants to kill you. How are you to get out? How do you defend yourself? Did you bring enough deodorant? Speaking of which, as in most RPGs, you have a limited number of items that you can use to replenish your health, like bread and other kinds of floor delicacies. But another thing that has a limit are your weapons. Every time you swing a sword at an enemy, it wears the sword down. Once you've worn down the sword completely, you can't attack anything until you pick up another weapon. But you should watch what you carry. Not because it'll kill you, although I have not picked up anything that has killed me as yet, but you have a limited number, a very limited number of items that you can hold in your bag. It's not like an adventure game where you can just pick up an infinite number of items and just shove them into your pocket and still have room to spare. You gotta be smart. But watch out, because the enemies in this game are smart too. You can't hack and slash endlessly at an enemy until they stop moving, no. They will block your attacks and even attack you while you're trying to attack them. So you've gotta block their attacks before they attack your weak point for massive damage.
Attack its weak point for massive damage.
It's really all a matter of timing. But even so, I love this game, and I look forward to wasting many more hours of my life on it. I hope you do the same. And I really mean that in the best and most positive way possible. Seriously.
Larry, I'm gonna kill you! Oh God, don't kill me! I have a gun in my pocket!
Ugh, I hate horror movies. Apart from the obvious classics and a few cult hits, horror movies have pretty much gone stale over the past 10 years, and maybe even longer than that. However, this is not the case in Europe and Asia, where horror is truly horrific. Some of the greatest horror classics of all time have come from Germany. Italy had a slew of genuinely scary movies in the 1970s and 1980s. And most recently, Asian and especially Japanese horror stories have been gaining some popularity. From novels like Battle Royale, Ring, and Parasite Eve, to movies like Audition, House, Kuroneko, and my personal favorite, Tetsuo the Iron Man, to countless horror anime and manga, Japanese horror has left a blood-stained thumbprint on horror fiction that has never been replicated in American cinema, nor ever will be. Case in point, Corpse Party. No, not that Corpse Party. This Corpse Party. Ah, now we're talking. Another relatively late release in the PlayStation Portable library, Corpse Party is one of the very few horror games that truly scares me. It's not just because of the gore or the jump scares, although there are plenty of those, but it's more about the psychological pain that the characters in the game have to endure. That, coupled with the fact that they're just a bunch of kids thrust into a situation in which they have little to no control over, that's pretty scary. I know of a few other scary Japanese stories that have this kind of plot device, like The Drifting Classroom and Barefoot Gen, but I think Corpse Party is a little more accessible than either of those. Anyway, Corpse Party, as I mentioned before, concerns a group of ordinary high school students who are thrust into some kind of alternate dimension. In this alternate dimension, the spirits of a bunch of murdered elementary school children haunt the grounds of the school in which they were murdered. Throughout the game, you collect various name tags off of the mutilated corpses of the kids, which are strewn about on the school grounds. They have the names of the kids, and sometimes very, very graphic descriptions of how they died. Whoa. But it's up to you to find your friends and ultimately find a way back home before the same fate that befell those who came before you comes upon you. Corpse Party is a truly terrifying, overlooked gem, and if you love horror movies and have not played it, play it. Right now. Trust me, it's awesome. Alright, before we get to my number one PlayStation Portable game, here are some honorable mentions. These are games that didn't quite make it to the list, either because I did not play them when I had a PSP back in the day, or did play them back in the day, but I didn't think that they were good enough to put on this list, or played them as recently as I was writing this list. But anyway, here they are.
Why do you have a gun in your pocket? Because I...
See, I told you we'd get back to dungeon crawlers. Claddon, this is an RPG, was the first dungeon crawler I ever played, and I absolutely loved it. I took this game everywhere with me. I'd play it on my lunch breaks in high school, I'd play it while waiting for my classes in college, I'd play it on those long car rides from Houston to LaPorte, I'd play it just to play it. Claddon, this is an RPG, or Classic Dungeon Fyoku no Masojin as it is known in Japan, was developed by System Prisma and published by Nippon Ichi Software in Japan on February 18, 2010, and then 7 months later in North America. And yes, as the title says, it is indeed an RPG, but there's more to it than that. For one thing, it's not really an RPG in the traditional sense, in that you don't just walk a few steps, run into an enemy, take turns hitting him with your sword until he stops moving, wash, rinse, and repeat. It's all action-based. You see an enemy on screen, you have one of two options: fight or flight. At first, the enemies you encounter aren't all that much of a threat, but very, very soon, certain enemies will absolutely slaughter you. And once they do, you lose everything. All the items you picked up, all the experience you gain, all of this you lose, and you have to start right back at square one. So it gets pretty important, pretty quick, that you have to defeat every enemy in every dungeon to beat the level. Because of this, Claddon, this is an RPG, is hard. It's hard, but not unfair. Every time I died, sure, it was frustrating, but I would always try another way to get around it. Some enemies take a lot of hits to die, but can kill you with 1 or 2 waves of their claws. I found that it's not a good idea to just run into them guns a-blazing Leroy Jenkins style. You gotta have a plan. But anyway, the story of Claddon, this is an RPG, is about 2 kids who enter the magical land of Arcana Sella. One kid wants to look for treasure, while the other just wants to go back home. Along the way, they have to fight vicious monsters, make a few colorful new friends, and feel a lot of pain. A lot of pain. But in conclusion, Claddon, this is an RPG, is my favorite PlayStation Portable game, and I am very happy that I can play it on my PlayStation Vita. Speaking of which, Claddon, this is an RPG, was followed by a sequel, Claddon X2, and there's another sequel, Classic Dungeon Sengoku, to be released on the PlayStation Vita in Japan on May 26th of this year. Here's me crossing my fingers for a physical North American release. What are you still doing here? I'm trying to work.